Hello and welcome to the Orange County Taxpayers Association OCTax Talk. I'm Carolyn Cavechi, President and CEO of OCTax, and we are so pleased to have with us today John Coupal from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the President and the CEO. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Good. Well, we're thrilled. We're huge supporters and big fans of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association.
Well, thank you. And you know, the reality is that the local groups are our eyes and ears at the local level to figure out what's going on. So we hear in Sacramento what's going on statewide. So really appreciate your organization and all the local taxpayer groups as well.
Thank you. So let's talk about Proposition 13 today, because that's obviously a huge focus for you at your association. So how did Prop 13 start? What caused it to come about?
Well, what caused it was runaway property taxes in the state of California. People were literally being taxed out of their homes, and not just in small numbers, but in very large numbers. Howard Jarvis was a businessman. He was the executive director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, and he worked with others to try to get property tax relief for a number of years. And what people don't realize is that he tried like 6 or 7 times to get tax relief before he got Prop 13, which is a testament to his tenacious nature. He was a very tenacious man. And Prop 13 came, and what's very interesting about Prop 13 is about every major business group was opposed to it, believe it or not. Every education group, labor group, all the editorial boards were against it, and yet it passed by 66%. This kind of reflects the disconnect sometimes between ordinary citizens and what we call political elites. But it's very important today because it helps do what it was intended to do, and that is to keep people in their homes. And it does that by capping the property tax rate to 1%. And it also limits, very important, just as important as the rate cap, is the fact that it limits the annual increase in taxable value of the home to 2% a year. What was happening in the 70s is that the tax rate could stay the same, but your values were doubling, and therefore your taxes would double. So very, very important that we have that limitation. Property is reassessed to full market value when it changes hands. That's basically the structure of 13. It works very well. It keeps people in their home. One of its shortcomings, however, is he wanted Prop 13 to be a limit on the size and growth of government in California. And unfortunately, on that score, it didn't happen. In California, as you know, we have very big government. Government is a growth industry. We have the highest income tax rate in America, highest state sales tax rate in America, highest fuel costs. The metrics, you know them, are horrible. But Prop 13 continues to this day to be very well revered by most people, by certainly a big majority of Californians. And of course, it's also appreciated now by the business community because it helps business competitiveness.
Very much so. So besides capping the property tax, are there other components to Proposition 13?
Sure, there were some voter approval requirements. For example, it was originally intended to impose a 2/3 voter approval requirement for special taxes. Those are taxes other than property tax. That provision was kind of watered down. It's still there for those kinds of taxes that are dedicated for specific purposes at the local level. Those still require a 2/3 vote. And it also required, and this is very, very important, a 2/3 vote of each house of the California legislature to impose a state tax. So it had other provisions as well.
So I hear a lot at the local level when I go out and talk to some of the community groups. You know, people will say, number one, that it's not fair that people who bought their homes back in the 70s or the 80s have a lower tax rate than people who just bought it yesterday. So what do you say to those people?
Well, I say that your taxes are based on what you were willing to pay for that property at that point in time.
Consumption tax.
It's a consumption tax. It has some of the same attributes as a sales tax because your tax is based on acquisition value. And the United States Supreme Court recognized the value of that provision, and in fact, we argue that an acquisition value-based system is actually more fair than a current value system, because what policy is actually being advanced by having your taxes depend on the real estate market, which is something you have no control over. So an acquisition value-based system, if you're going to have a property tax at all, the acquisition value system is more fair. And in fact, the United States Supreme Court said it had the had the additional beneficial effect of maintaining the integrity of neighborhoods. So there's all kinds of positive policies that flow from Prop 13 that most honest people recognize today.
And it doesn't matter if you bought your house in 1970 or, my daughter who might buy a house, next year.
Right.
You're still protected.
You're still protected by the 1% rate. And for recent home buyers, all they have to do is stay in their home for 3 or 4 years and they begin to see the benefits from that limitation, the annual increases. So they used to be complaining about their neighbors who have been there for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Just over a little bit of time, they start to see that benefit as well. So the actual constituency, if you will, for Prop 13 is really about 80% of all property owners because they, again, you just have to be in your home for a short period of time before you see that benefit.
And we hear an argument about commercial versus residential. So, residents carry the greater burden of Prop 13 or commercial properties carry the greater burden. Have you guys looked at that?
Yes, we've looked at that very, very closely. And the fact of the matter is there has been no real shift to residential properties. There has been a shift in terms of the total property tax pie that they pay. However, that's largely due to land use issues as California's manufacturing has moved out of the state because
we can do a whole other segment on that, can't we?
So we actually have more bedrooms than we do businesses. So that's a reflection of land use, not any unfair advantage of businesses. And I would argue that, is it fair to businesses when residentials pay more because you've driven out the businesses because this is a hostile tax environment. So that argument doesn't carry water.
Interesting. So obviously, we believe at OCTax Proposition 13 it really is a hallmark for taxpayers for our state, and without it, we'd be number one in everything. Just at least with property tax, we're lower than that. What should the taxpayers be looking for as far as threats to Prop 13 be going away?
Yeah, there's a lot of threats. There's that split roll threat that's recurring, like a bad weed, comes up every 2-year cycle. So it's the split roll. Certainly lowering of the 2/3 vote is a big ticket item for the tax and spend left. They would love to lower the 2/3 vote for statewide taxes, for local special taxes. They would like to lower the 2/3 vote for bonds. They've never liked the 2/3 vote. But as we say, the 2/3 vote is there to protect a minority, and one definition of democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner.
Right.
So, so the 2/3 vote is very important. And parcel taxes are a huge threat to property owners today because there's billions in being seen in
and we're seeing a lot of that at the local level. A lot of local different local cities are trying to look at that for more tax increases for them.
Right, and also property-related fees and charges. We're beginning to see a lot of additional costs being shifted to fee structures, so your sewer bill and other utility bills. Local governments they really want to put as much of the weight of government on these enterprise activities because those aren't as restricted as tax revenues.
Okay, so if you were to just, as we wrap up here, if you were to look at the Prop 13 doubter that says it's not good for the state of California, it's not good for the economy, it's bad for new homeowners, how would you wrap it up with them?
Well, I would wrap it up by noting that prior to Proposition 13's being adopted by the state of California, there was a UCLA economics professor who intoned that if Prop 13 passed, California would be plunged into recession. Well, Prop 13 passed and California saw its greatest economic growth because people had more money in their pockets. So Prop 13 has been a godsend to both businesses and homeowners in the state of California, and we would be very foolish to change any aspect of it.
Good, amen. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Carolyn, I appreciate it.
If you're looking to get more information about Proposition 13, you can go to the OCTax website. You can sign our Prop 13 support pledge, get our monthly newsletter, as well as other information about Orange County Taxpayers Association education, events, or membership. Or you can go to our Facebook page, the Orange County Taxpayers Association. We'll see you next time on OCTax Talk.